Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, chapter 881 of One Piece is out. So if you haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Guys, let's not beat around the bush. I expect many people will not like this chapter because it wasn't focused on Luffy versus Katakuri in an actual fight, but I absolutely love this chapter. This chapter didn't have a shocking reveal. There was no crazy power-up, new power, or transformation. There was no amazing fight. All it was an emphasis, really a chapter dedicated towards explaining why Jimbei deserves to be a Straw Hat, what his future role on the crew will be, and why it is so useful and important. And for me, guys, it is more than enough. Am I looking forward to the fight of Luffy versus Katakuri? You're damn straight I do. But that doesn't take away from the necessity to emphasize within the narrative just how important Jimbei is, especially in the arc where he will be officially joining. In the arcs in which we get new Straw Hats, something like this always occurs, and I think that it allows you to appreciate the character more. We're going to be spending a lot more time with Jimbei. I know there's lots of voices out there that are saying that Jimbei is destined to die, that he's not cool enough to be a Straw Hat, that there's all sorts of problems, that, you know, he's just a tease, right? Oda's just going to throw him in and then we're going to get someone else because Jimbei isn't worth it. And to those people, this chapter essentially, I mean, if it wasn't already confirmed, it essentially confirms Jimbei's here to stay. And you know, I want to talk more about this because I really don't want you to forget that there was a several-year period after it was extremely obvious that Jimbei was going to join the Straw Hat crew that people absolutely said there was 0% chance of it happening. And so guys, I actually remember this pretty vividly, but part of the arguments people used was that they didn't see a role for Jimbei on the crew. What is he going to be, the fishman of the crew? Is he going to go swim around and save the Strats when they get knocked off the ship? And some people, many people even, who were pro Jimbei at the time said, well, maybe he'll end up being the helmsman. There have been low-key hints that Jimbei is a helmsman from the time that we can see him sort of navigating the ship between Impel Down and Marineford. And to that, people said, no, that's ridiculous. How can, we already have a helmsman. Frankie is the helmsman. And even if we don't have a helmsman, what need would we have for a helmsman? What role could they possibly serve? They just steer the ship. You go left, you go right, you go center. And Oda definitively teabagged pretty much everyone who thought that a helmsman couldn't be useful. After this last chapter, I'm almost left thinking that the helmsman was one of the most important aspects of the Straw Hat crew that we were missing since potentially a shipwright. But anyway, guys, the speculation before the chapter is, you know, how exactly are these Straw Hats going to get out of this situation? And there's really two lines of thought, and that did not include what the actual truth was. The two lines of thought were that the wave is actually going to connect and Big Mom's going to capture the ship. This is an idea that I was supporting. The other counter idea was that Jimbei, or potentially Jimbei and the rest of the Sun Pirates who miraculously return, are actually going to in some way deflect the wave and save the ship using Fishman Karate. But I love the direction Oda chose to go instead. Instead of highlighting Jimbei's strength, which I don't think that his own strength, or even the strength of him and his entire crew, could compete with Big Mom's wave, no, instead he used his technical skill and his future role on the ship to save them. It was just beautiful. Guys, I'll admit to not being a surfer. I had never heard of the Green Room before, but you know, now I know. But I think the other thing that I really liked about this from this last chapter is just how magical the moment felt. With the Thousand Sunny essentially riding a wave as though they were surfing it. This is part of the reason why I really like One Piece. There's just a mystical and magical element of sort of the impossible occurring, but that in this world the impossible is the regular for the exceptional. It really gives me nostalgia for the feelings that I had when I first saw the Sunny go up Reverse Mountain, or when I saw the Sunny ride the knock-up stream to the Sky Islands. I really think that there are few other stories, whether they be books or manga, other comics, TV shows, or movies, that really capture a sense of wonder like One Piece does. And so yeah guys, that happened. But what is really interesting to me is what happens next. The sequence of events that might occur because of this could be very, very interesting. And the first thing that I want to note to you, Sparrow said it at the beginning of this chapter, Big Mom, if you crush the ship with your waves, you'll be destroying the cake. I believe this to be very important. Big Mom obviously is out of her mind, and on top of that, even when she's within her mind, she's really dumb, like super dumb. And so her goal this entire time has been the wedding cake. And so if she inadvertently destroys the ship which supposedly contained the cake, specifically if Sparrow is going to tell her pretty much that she just destroyed the cake, then what is Big Mom going to do next? Well, she should still be looking for the cake, and if she presumes these Straw Hats to have died, which Sparrow has done, Big Mom seems to have done, and nobody aside from Katakuri may suspect otherwise, meaning that it's very, very questionable what Big Mom does next. But I do think that this could possibly lead into Big Mom killing Sparrow, because I believe the next thing that she will do is she'll turn to the closest person to her and ask them to give her a cake. The only other things besides this that make sense would be if Katakuri intervenes and essentially tells Sparrow that the Straw Hats had actually survived, because there are some, dots of him thinking, observing the situation, which make me suspect that he suspects that the Straw Hats did find a way to escape, because obviously Luffy is talking to someone, right? So maybe Sparrow is able to convince Big Mom that they are actually alive somewhere. And this could also be true without Katakuri, that we've seen Big Mom get manipulated by Sparrow's lies in the past. Perhaps all Sparrow need do is lie again, tell her the cake is somewhere else, and it will continue Big Mom on her chase. I'm gonna say that at face value, thinking about it, this isn't a course of action for this story that I necessarily would be looking forward to, but of course is possible. Another interesting question is whether or not Katakuri overheard Luffy talking to the Straw Hat crew and specifically made out that Sanji and Pudding were making the cake on Cocoa Island and that they were supposed to meet on Cocoa Island. If Katakuri heard this, then this could be the way in which enemies end up arriving in Cocoa Island. Even on the last chapter, we sort of heard Pudding talking to the residents there. If anyone happens to come to this island, don't tell them that we're here. Essentially telling us as the audience, right? Somebody is going to come and screw up their plans in some way. And so this could be a way in which the Big Mom Pirates become aware of sort of what's going on and where they need to be. Pretty much the two popular ideas for who may crash the cake baking is either the Vinsmoke or Daifuku. Specifically to give a fighting opponent for Sanji. And so I'll admit to not being a huge fan of the Daifuku idea, but this train right here, or this sequence of events, could very well lead to something like that occurring. And I think another low-key important thing that kind of unravels some of my previous thoughts about where Whole Cake Island might be going is the fact that the Straw Hats actually do not plan on luring Big Mom anywhere. That their first course of action is actually to meet Sanji, as well as hopefully Luffy, in Cocoa Island. And then from there, they're going to progress to try and feed Big Mom the cake. And so supposedly it's going to take the Straw Hats crew around 10 hours in order to reach Cocoa Island. And so guys, honestly, I am as confused as anyone else about what exactly is going to happen. Because during this 10-hour period, Luffy is going to be fighting Katakuri. I don't presume that the fight can last that long, but maybe it can. And then also at the same time, Big Mom is going to be doing something. The Big Mom Pirates are going to be doing something. And this is even more baffling, which is the time frame that we got in the last chapter about how long it is they're trying to finish the cake by is about 3 hours, which would mean that by 3 hours they would have finished with the cake 7 hours before the Straw Hats actually arrive on Cocoa Island. And they don't seem to have a great way to communicate with each other. So there's really only two things. Is Sanji, Pudding, and Chiffon going to leave Cocoa Island with the cake while these Straw Hats still haven't met up with them? Or are they going to be delayed by around 7 hours? This all seems very curious to me, but one thing I do want to point out to you is I did a theory recently talking about the potential that the freezing of the waters around Whole Cake Island, the freezing of the juice and the ants might actually be foreshadowing of something that might play a role in the future of the story. And in this chapter specifically, Nami said that in 10 hours time would be around 1 a.m. This is almost a perfect setup for something like this to actually be reintroduced into the story. I almost feel like beforehand I was a little on the fence about whether or not this might play a role or not, but now it almost seems as though it's likely. I mean, why else would Nami specifically point out the time of the day that they would arrive? Why would the nighttime, 1 o'clock in the morning, be relevant, if not to relate towards the last time that they were sailing at night, when the juice seas froze over, and the Sunny couldn't travel anymore? But yeah, I could speculate a ton of things right now, but I think it's just best to move on to the end of this chapter, which I think confused a lot of people. We have Luffy essentially running around the mirror world, attempting to talk to the Strats. Brule and the rest of the Big Mom pirates in the mirror world were first curious as to why the Straw Hat ship didn't look like it was drowning. Then all the mirrors broke, and they just assumed that was because of the water pressure. And so then Luffy took the time to run away and attempt to talk to them to set up plans, Katakuri following behind. But what is curious is sort of what was Luffy doing? Like, there were some really weird things happening. Like, Luffy smiled somewhere in the middle, and a lot of people think that maybe that wasn't actually Luffy, but like Brule using her mirror powers to reflect him. And you guys should know by now that I do love speculating. I like potentially seeing things in the story which may not be obvious, but here I think the obvious is that Luffy is putting on an act for the Strat crew to give them morale. And I think this scene sold it for me. Luffy is casually talking with them as he's running. Katakuri eventually catches up to him and stops his progress and then kicks him. Meanwhile, Luffy turns the mirror in his hand away from his body so that the Strats cannot see what's going on. Luffy's kick actually goes straight through the mirror in his hand, breaking it. Meanwhile, Luffy covers his mouth because he does not want the Strats to know that he, at this exact moment, is getting beaten. The Strats then ask, "What happened, Luffy?" And Luffy is getting pummeled all the while, making sure that he doesn't utter even a single gasp of air. And as he is bleeding and struggling, he then takes that piece of mirror, most probably turns it towards his face, and smiles, reassuring them that he will be okay. Hurry up, guys, and come already. Hurry up and reach the island. I'm already getting tired of waiting for you. To me, this chapter was mainly about the Straw Hats' roles. Jimbei as a new crew member performing his, and Luffy doing the same as the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, that he cannot show weakness, he must be the glue that holds them together. Especially in a hopeless situation such as this, where they need that morale, specifically after Pedro died. I really feel as though Luffy is dead set in this particular situation to make sure that his crew isn't worried about them, so that they go and take care of their own business so that Luffy can focus on his in the mirror world. But anyway, guys, that's all I wanted to say today. I thought that this chapter was really, really great, despite it still being another tease chapter for Luffy versus Katakuri. But undoubtedly that will happen probably sooner rather than later. And I think that this moment, as well as many others before it, just make that fight that much more meaningful. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think about this chapter. Let me know if you noticed anything from this chapter that I may have missed. Just let me know. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to check out links to Patreon as well as Discord in the description. I want to give a huge thanks to all of my Patreons. Subscribe if you haven't, and all you guys have a wonderful day.